Hi and welcome back to another Indie Network. I'm very pleased to be joined by not only an editing professional, but my editor, Andrew Lowe, who's here to chat to us tonight all about the importance of editing, the process of editing, and what it's like to be an editor as well. So we get to see from the other side of the process as well. So welcome, Andy. Pleasure to have you on here. Thanks for joining us.
It's fine, no problem.
Tell us a bit more about yourself then. Tell us where you've come from, because you're not only an editor, but you're also an author as well of thrillers.
Yeah, I'm an ex-journalist, so I've been working with words for a long time, and creating them, polishing them, working with other people's words, rewriting other people's words, and then pretending that they're still their own, and I didn't rewrite them. So yeah, and I moved over into books, a few years ago, and realised I wanted to kind of work with deeper sort of stories and longer form stories, because when you're a journalist, you work with 800,000, 2,000 words here and there, and you've got to polish that. Sometimes cover lines, where you've got to polish 10 words into something perfect.
That's tough.
So yeah, so it's a kind of progression that, I think I wanted to I've always loved fiction and reading, so I wanted to give myself the time to write and also, edit to actually make money until the books start to pay.
That is one of the problems that a lot of authors face when they first start out. So from your journalism, career, what sort of journalism did you specialise in?
Mainly sort of man-child kind of journalism, like films, TV, video games. Yeah. And I mean, when I say journalist, I wasn't in like Sierra Leone or anything like that. It was mainly pop culture. I remember I wrote a particularly tiresome piece for Men's Health about runners and shin splints. That was a bit of a career low, but mostly quite glamorous sort of film journalism stuff, and lots of editing, lots of junkets, and editing magazines and editing websites. So yeah, I mean, I tell the story in that when I was a film journalist, I was offered a gig to interview Tom Cruise in LA at the Four Seasons Hotel, I think it was, and it was like first class, and I sort of went, nah, I don't, that's fine. And that's where I realised it was time to move on and start doing something different. When you get that instinctive reaction. So I moved on from thinking, oh, that's so glamorous, to thinking that's a lot of messing about going on. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I suppose you kind of realise your heart's kind of left it a little bit, and you need to work. You need to get something else to excite you.
So you jump from that to work as a freelance editor with, indie authors. Did you sort of think about working with any of the big houses or medium publishers, or was it, individual authors that was your main goal?
Well, what I wanted to work in an area that had more creative freedom, and I know people who worked with big publishing houses, designers and editors, and they all tell the same story, that ultimately there's a house style, there's a constriction, there's a specific way of doing things, and that's fine. That's obviously, it's commercial.
Yeah, of course.
Right, and traditional publishing is heavily, tunneled down this kind of commercial approach. So I wanted to be a little bit more. I realized I thought I'd learn more if I was just working with lots of types of authors, applying my skills specifically to their projects and making them, getting them to realize their sort of visions for the books rather than sort of a sausage factory kind of thing approach. That's a pejorative way of putting it, but that is how traditional publishing works. It's purely commercial, and if they don't think your book is gonna sell, then it won't get produced. But what's exciting about independent publishing, I think, is that you're in this kind of constricted area. Is it going to sell? Is it going to find a market in traditional? In independent publishing, you can try all kinds of things out, lots of mashups of genres. You don't need to follow the latest trend. You can set them a little bit more yourself. You have a little bit more freedom. I wanted to work with people who knew their stuff, who could write, but who maybe wanted to kind of develop, and had a developmental sort of mindset, a learning kind of mindset, rather than just kind of be sort of funneled into a big publishing house and churn out their product.
So let's get into the meat of the issue here, and obviously the main reason why I've got you onto the Indie Network, and that's to actually chat about the editing process. Why is editing vital to today's indie author?
I think it's crucial because you have to realise what editing isn't, I think, more than what it is. And a lot of people think of editors as people who are going to write all over their beautiful words and say, see me, and kind of rewrite their copy, rewrite their stories. And what it is for me anyway, is it's collaborative, and it's very similar to a music producer. If you have a music producer and the band brings the creative, raw materials, and they want to make an album or something, and the producer's job for me is to get the best possible version of that album out there.
Yeah.
And they're playing the instruments, they conceived everything, and the music producer's job is to listen and to to apply their skills and to collaborate with these people. And that's very similar the way I work with authors. I want to care about the book, which is why I don't offer proofreading, because I want to be involved. I want my hands dirty at the point where it's interesting, which is where you're just getting the story, really honing it into shape and chiseling it. And at the end of it, I want to care about the book. I don't just want it to be a mechanical process of fixing typos. If you write a novel, lots of people have different ways of semantically putting this, but I think ultimately it boils down to you have to tell yourself the story, which is the first draft. That is, you've got all these ideas and you've planned everything out, but your first draft has to be an unself-conscious telling of the story to yourself. You should be looking forward to sitting down and telling yourself the next chapter, next section of the story, without anyone else watching you. Ideally, don't tell anyone about it. Don't say, "Oh, I've got a great thing." I know it's tempting if you've written something, you're pleased with it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
that's you. That's in your head, and it's you getting it out of your head and telling yourself the story. And then I think the second phase is where you put it away, and you come back to it with more of a reader's eye view, and that's where it gets interesting. That's where you start to kick things into shape. You start to look at things like, I can't believe I wrote that, or why haven't I made more of that? That's brilliant. And then you start to really hone it into shape. And at the end of phase 2, or the second draft, that is where I think you need to work with somebody else. You need another pair of eyes on it, and which is where an editor comes in. And people talk about developmental editing and structural editing, and during phase 2, I guess that's where you would work with those people. But for me, I prefer copy line editing. Where I work, I like to work at the point where the author's been through all the stuff about the broader structural picture, and they're happy with the story and they know what's going on. But then I come in and I, like I said, a music producer, make it sound as good as it possibly can sound, realize their vision in a kind of as evolved a way as possible. That's the key, to go in positively as a collaboration and not think, oh, this person's going to come along, they're scary, they're going to tell me my writing's rubbish. Because that's not the case. What an editor-author relationship should be is a collaboration, and it's your voice. It's finding the best possible version of that book, of the voice in that book, and at the end of it, it should be a publishable work. And there's a lot of work involved in that, as you know. You can knock something off nice and quickly and get it onto Amazon, but it won't do you any good in the long run. It will do you much better if you work with a professional designer and a professional editor, and at the end you have an absolutely top quality product that can stand there next to anything from any of the big publishing houses, because their processes have been honed. They're incredibly professional people and operations, but their emphasis is just a bit different in independent publishing. As I say, they're more focused on the commercial channel. And with independent publishing, with all the technology, with access to technology now, there's no reason whatsoever why you can't mirror those processes as an independent author. Exactly. And working with a professional editor is part of that process.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and that's something we keep coming back to on the Indie Networks, is that test, the holding up your book to a traditionally published book, rather, and looking at whether there's a difference between them. Obviously, the goal being zero difference. I'm really, really glad you said that. And I think it's my number one tip.
The traditional product, remember, has been honed over many, many years. Things have been tried, and there's all kinds of things you can do with books as a medium. But it's the basics have been really carefully honed. It's not a case of copying those, but it's a case of trying to apply that level of standard, that level of high standard to the product. Editing in a way is a balance between technical correctness and the reader experience. And when I was a journalist, it was much more about further towards the technical correctness and spilling over into the reader experience in the centre somewhere. I think fiction is much more focused on the reader experience because you can really play around, you can invent words. I don't know how you do yourself. You can be more playful with fiction, and people don't expect it, but they accept it more, and they're happy with it. But if it's a non-fiction book, it can be a bit annoying if you start to mess with the medium. But I think that's the balance for me as an editor. I'm always looking for the reader experience is always first, and the technical correctness. If there's a fight, the technical correctness will lose. If there's a passage or a sentence or a phrase, I think, you know what, there's something about that. The reader will enjoy it. There's clarity, there's whatever, poetry, and technical correctness be done. It's make a good book a great book. So that's a long answer to why you should work as an editor.
But I think it's a natural thing for authors to worry and to have so much time and effort go into this one product and then sort of hand it over to someone thinking exactly what you think, that there's someone who's going to rip it apart. And I think it's really important for anyone watching this video to understand that it's a collaborative process, exactly as you said, for the better. It's not a process that's designed to beat you down and to make you feel bad about your writing.
It's not to do with whether you can write or not. This is the worry that people have. There are lots of ways to measure good, bad writing. There are lots of criteria, and some people this is highly subjective. But generally speaking, it's not about telling someone they can't write, and if only you'd written it this way, then it would be good writing. It's about, as I say, it's that voice. It's finding the best possible version of the story they're trying to tell. And it's in there somewhere. It's almost sort of like sculpting and getting rid of the kind of stuff that's extraneous. Often I find when I finished with a book, this might sound a bit scary, but it's much shorter than it was when I started. But not by a huge amount, but mostly what I tend to do is I'm honing it. I'm honing a lot of the speech tags, for example. A lot of things. There's a lot of things in books when I first start to work with them that don't need to be there. And they're just repeating speech tags or adverbs or all kinds of stuff like that. That once you get rid of it, that's not to say that you're a bad writer because you put them in the first place. At the point in the process where you inserted those adverbs, it wasn't your priority to make sure that you weren't putting them in. If you see what I mean, it's later on where you go through, and that's where you start to refine it. The most important thing about the actual writing part of that journey is that you just keep going. You just keep telling yourself the story, and don't worry about what yesterday or the day before. Because by definition, that thing is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So the more anxiety you have about what's come before is only going to grow. So just have to keep going forward. And then the other great thing when you get to work with an editor, a good editor, it should feel that you are handing over something and it's in good hands. That's the key thing.
You just mentioned there, good editor, which I think is a very, very good point. And I think it's a point that a lot of people struggle with, again, is what is a good editor? How do you find the right editor for you? So as a professional editor yourself, would you have any tips for what to look for when you're actually finding professionals? How can you tell the good from the bad? Are there any sort of watchwords or phrases we should be looking out for?
Well, I think that the first thing you need to do is ask yourself, does this person seem interested in my book? Do they seem not, they don't have to be excited about it, but do they seem invested in it? Do they seem to be interested in the story you say you're trying to tell? Or do they very quickly start to talk about money or talk about or you want to first have somebody who's saying, tell me about your book, I think, and tell me about the 3, 5, 7 years you spent writing it. And because they need to decide whether it's going to work as a relationship, whether it's going to work. And so they are almost sort of choosing you as well as you choosing them, because only a bad editor will just take any kind of job because it's for the work. It's about, so you need to feel there's some sort of rapport, there's some kind of a relationship going where, you don't necessarily have to have somebody who eats and breathes kind of fancy to edit a fancy novel, but you do need to have to work to get a sense that you're going to be working with someone who's going to be interested in what you're writing. It's not just a mechanical process. No. So I think you're onto a good thing with an editor when, first and foremost, they ask you about the book. They want to know why you've written it. They want to know what it's about, what you're trying to achieve, rather than saying, "So here's the fee."
Yeah. How much money you got?
Yeah. I think it's it's most like a lot of author services, as you're well aware. There are a lot of services that I would now call vanity publishing, which is basically where people are trying to make money from the authors, as opposed to get the author a good product that they can make money from. Yeah. So and there's a lot of those sharks out there, and that's very similar to what they will do. They will start to talk about how much this costs, and how much this package costs, and how much that package costs.
Yeah, straight away.
Yeah, suddenly your bank account is draining away. Yeah. So I think the first thing is that do they talk book? First, do they talk story, fiction, creativity? What are you trying to achieve with this project? Then, once you get that rapport going, you need to know that they know their stuff. There's a bit of controversy about, do you get an editor to do a test edit or a sample edit? I think also you need to look at testimonials, who they worked with before. That's important. Look at their website, who they worked with before.
I think that's very important.
See what people have said about them. My website's full of testimonials because I think it's really important to have. It's important for me to record that who I've worked with and what I've done, so I can see I can see for myself. So you must check who they've worked with before. Yeah. Sure, editors have to start somewhere, and they might not have that much behind them, but they might well be a good editor, of course. But generally speaking, in that case, you just want to hear them talk about your book, and they're interested, and their heart is in it. Otherwise, a bit of that, and also if they're there, look at their testimonials.
In regards to after you found your great editor, then you found the right editor for you.
Yeah.
What's the process from there? So you've confirmed it. You've got a date in mind. The files that have gone over. What's the process for you?
I like to work in chunks depending on the book. So I've been through a couple of methods, but this is the one that seems to work best. Is the
chunk method?
Yeah. Well, it's breaking things down. It's that, as you know, as an author, that's the only way That's the only way I can write a novel. I can't think, okay, I'm going to write a novel. Bring up my blank word processor page. It's terrifying.
And done.
Yeah.
Never.
As you know, you break it down. You go, right, I'm going to write 500 words. I'm going to write 5,000 words, and that's much more bearable. I'll edit maybe 10 to 20,000, depending on the size of the book. They will review that edit as I'm building a style sheet, which is the kind of DNA of all the terms and the mechanics of the book. And then they'll review that, and then there'll be my comments asking about certain things, clarifying certain things I don't understand.
Yeah.
All my technical changes, and for which they're free to accept or reject, because it's obviously purely an advisory process. Yeah. Some authors I work with are quite happy to trust me with all the technical stuff. They believe I'm kind of, doing a good job in terms of killing speech tags and adverbs and semicolons. And they focus on my comments. And so then they'll reply to the comments, and they'll send me back that 10, 20,000 chunk. And over the process of the schedule, usually around about a 4 to 5 week schedule, I will amend based upon their comments onto a master edit that the author doesn't see until the very end.
That's good.
So that way it's been purely collaborative all the way through, and the author's been able to comment on my comments.
Good.
I capture everything, and then I implement it into a master edit. So by the very end, then I'll send that back to the author at the end, and with the style sheet, and then they can go to a proofreader for that final polish, because no editor's perfect. There will be things you miss.
Yeah.
That proofread is your final sort of belt and braces.
That's great.
And then at the end of that, you've got something that you're both 100% about. You both feel that you've been that you've had a part of, and that feels to me like a manageable way of approaching maybe 20,000, 200,000 words of copy.
I think that, from an author's point of view, is a lot better than simply giving someone your manuscript and then not hearing from them for a month.
And they go off the radar for 6 weeks, and then you get 150,000 words back.
Yeah, and it's red pen everywhere.
I don't know. I mean, I just think that's really unmanageable and
daunting. I think
it's not very pleasurable. It should feel like a pleasure, It's not, you're not, down the pits.
No.
It should feel. It's work. It is hard work.
Yeah.
Work doesn't have to be physical. It's hard mental work. There's a lot of stamina involved in writing a book. There's a lot of dips and peaks and troughs. There's a lot of moments where you'll think, I'm not sure this is any good or not. I'm bored with it. Or, there's a lot of things like that, and you have to stay on target to the very end. And then the other thing I should have mentioned earlier about working with an editor is they can renew your enthusiasm for something that you've been lived with for years, months, whatever. And so they come along and they can start to rekindle your own sort of enthusiasm for the project.
Yeah, I've definitely found that in the past. Working with obviously you, but also previous editors as well. If there's a point that you weren't sure about for the entire writing of the novel, and suddenly you get a message going, "I really like this bit," where you're working back through and you see a comment, "So I really like what you've done." It does give you a very sort of pleasant kick. You are a good author. You've achieved.
Stop worrying. The thing I do is when you said how do I work, a big part of how I work is when you go through my edits, those comments are not just me saying, I don't understand this. What are you trying to say? I think this could be better this way. Or you've mentioned something that hasn't happened yet. Cut and paste nightmares like that.
That's it.
There will be those. But I also try to leave comments for things that I really enjoy, little passages or sentences or turns of phrase. There'll be an exclamation mark, a smiley face, a nice, something like that. Because that's how I feel when I'm reading it. That's part of me being emotionally invested in the book.
You mentioned that, obviously that, in a way, makes the experience and the job easier for an author. At the same time, it's not all corrections and errors and things like that. It's also a bit of, encouragement and transparency. Flipping that around, how can the author make your job easier? Because obviously time is money when it does come to an editor.
First, can I just plug my Readsy, my Facebook thing, which is I did a Facebook Readsy live Facebook session on self-editing.
Okay.
And in that, I say, I give, I think, about 10 things to go through to make sure you've done before you go to an editor.
Excellent. We'll get a link up for that.
Yeah. But generally, a few including stuff like search for the word very.
Yeah.
And just get rid of them all.
Yeah.
So that's the first one you can do.
Very, okay, cool.
Yeah, I've been through a manuscript and thought this needs more berries. So just get rid of all the berries. You're not very sad, you're miserable, you're not very fat, you're enormous. So lose the berries.
Yeah.
But then there's lots and lots of, because that's all I do anyway, that's the first thing I do with the manuscript. And I mean, the other stuff that you need to do is, I get a lot of requests saying, can you edit my book? And sometimes I have to reply saying, I don't think it's ready for editing yet, rather than, as I say, okay, show me the money. I want to make sure that the author has been through this process, and a lot of it is going to be involved. It's going to be about self-editing, that second phase I mentioned, where you're looking at your speech tags, you're looking at your dialogue and thinking, do I need to mention who's speaking there? And particularly if you have scenes where there are two people talking and you're constantly telling us who's saying what. She said, yeah. Because you don't need that, particularly two people talking. Be more creative in the way that you tell me who's speaking. Reducing the mental drag on the reader. Is
That's
it
a great
needed?
way of putting it. Mental drag. I like that.
Yeah. Is it sort of my mantra is it needed? So I'm always looking at sort of a part of a book, a sentence, a paragraph, a chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Is it needed? Is the question. And that's not to say a book should be purely, skeletal and only everything black and white. Colour, absolutely, a lot of colour, a lot of flair is great. But some parts of the book you should be more Spartan, you should be more descriptive and black and white and stark. And in some areas maybe you need a little bit more poetry, a bit more flourish. If it's all one thing and none of the other, it's going to feel like a drain on the reader experience, as I mentioned. Telling and showing, again, balance of both. Some places, is it needed? You need a bit of showing. some places you need more telling. Fine. This idea that you should always show and never tell, I don't believe that. So it's really about that. Is it needed? As always should be your mantra. Is this right for this part of the book? It's not like cleaning up before the cleaner comes round. This is a middle class analogy. It's sort of like taking your underpants off the chair and just making the cleaner's job a bit more pleasant, a bit more sort of smooth. It's not about doing the hoovering before they come round. It's just about going through your manuscript and making sure it's tidy, as tidy as you possibly can make it, and then the editor has got plenty of scope to do their job really well.
In summary there, it's make sure that you're actually not just going, I'm done, and then throw it over to an editor. Spend time doing it yourself. Self-editing, second, third drafting, beta reading. Is that sort of a word that you instantly sort of wince at? Or do you think actually beta reading is an important point, in the early stages before you come to an editor? Because that's something I recommend.
I had a great tip from Scott from Unbound. He's one of the founders of Unbound. He said, your beta reader should not be someone you've slept with or are hoping to sleep with. So it's kind of like, if you can follow that rule, then you're going to have a reasonably, objective, honest kind of opinion of a read. And your mum, your best mate, they're all going to tell you it's brilliant. That's fine for your ego, that's fine. But it might not be brilliant. It's probably okay, but at least. But you're not going to get your best friend or your girlfriend is going to tell you it's going to tell you what they really think. But at the same time, you don't want someone who's too objective, who sort of says, "Oh, I hate this."
Yeah, everything is wrong.
So you need to choose your beta reader carefully. I think that there's value in beta readers and writers groups and critique groups, but ultimately you've got to be careful that you don't write a novel by committee. It's your vision. You're the artist. Let's be honest about this. Let's be bold. We're artists, and it's an artistic. You need to be fascistic when you're creating a work of art. You cannot sort of open it out to the masses. It has to be your vision. You have to make the mistakes. Now I'm going to name drop. I interviewed Guillermo del Toro a few years ago. He said the great thing. He said, you must make your own mistakes. So you must feel that you've made your own mistakes. He said it's important that at the end of a project, he's made some great films. I think he's also made some sort of early average films. He said, at the end of it, it's your thing. And you take all the advice and you listen, and the skill, and you will develop it as you write more, is to recognise the things that you need to listen to, and think, okay, I'm not too worried about that, because you're going to get all kinds of conflicting advice the more beta readers you use. So it's up to you how involved you think you are as an author in terms of how well you recognise the stuff that you need to listen to and the stuff that you can ignore. So in the end, if it doesn't work, if the book is badly reviewed, the worst case scenario, everyone hates it, you can at least sit back and think, okay, I made some mistakes. I'm going to learn, and then the next thing I do, I'm going to learn from the mistakes I made. I'm going to go forward, and it's still your thing, even though it hasn't worked out. The worst thing would be, I think, to get a book that's badly reviewed and you sit there thinking, I wish I hadn't listened to all those people and taken all their advice, because that'll just drive you crazy.
One of the common problems with beta readers is choosing too many beta readers. I wouldn't go anywhere beyond sort of maybe 6 to 8. I used to recommend more, but again, you get too much feedback. I think it only takes maybe 2 or 3, let's say out of 5 beta readers, if 2 or 3 are highlighting the same problem, then it's definitely worth paying attention. I think that's enough of a majority that you need.
The thing I'm writing is set on a tropical island, so I'm getting a reader who runs experiences for people to go to desert islands, and they're going to read the book. So they're going to point things out that's going to be helpful for my technical, almost like a technical advisor as a beta reader.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
If you're writing a novel set in Egyptian times, and you want somebody to, then great, get someone who's an Egyptologist or someone who knows about it, who can at least give you a really strong worthwhile opinion on how technically correct it is. So decide what you want to get out of beta readers. Same with writers groups, same with writer and critique groups. They're great, but also I've heard writers say they just feel overwhelmed by the amount of things that's coming in, and they're trying to filter it all out and get their book written.
Yeah.
I saw a brilliant thing the other day saying, a feature online saying the 100 greatest websites for author advice or something like that. Like, because there isn't enough of that, is there? Yeah. There's not enough people trying to give you advice about how to write.
Exactly. You don't need that many websites in your life.
You just need to, that's the thing with digital culture, you're only a click away from somebody telling you the exact opposite of what someone else told you. You need to decide what you want out of them. Depends on the book. It really, really depends on the book.
I think that's great advice. No, thanks, Andrew. So in regards to actually, finding your editors, obviously beta readers, you would probably either go in search of these people. They might be fans, existing fans. They might be, people who work with the written word, etc. But obviously editors, professionals. Let's say you don't know an editor or have a contact with an editor. Where would you find them? Where would we find someone like you?
Well, get a recommendation. Get recommendations from fellow authors, and there are plenty of agencies, online agencies. I use a particularly good online agency called Reedsy. They are excellent. They have a really good philosophy. It's a startup. It was put together by people whose whole philosophy was to empower authors and to empower professionals, and to put professionals together with authors and to work on, as I was saying before, to be totally focused on making the products as good as it possibly can be. There are some great editors, some great designers on there, and they're expanding in all kinds of directions at the moment. So I really recommend Reedsy. And also, you can obviously go direct based on websites. A lot of recommendations. A lot of my work comes from client recommendation.
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth comes from repeat clients. Look at their testimonials, as I say, and if you like the sound of an editor, then sound them out. And again, use that test. Do they ask you about the book? Do they say, "Tell me about your book"? If they say that, that's first hurdle cleared. If they say, "Well, my fee is this; it's recently gone up," or whatever, then be wary.
Book rather than checkbook.
Yeah. You need them. You need just see how long, if you make contact with an editor, then how long it takes them to start asking you about your book. But there are lots of places online. I think there are places called Bibliocrunch. I think there's sort of agencies.
There's the literary consultancy as well.
Cornerstone is good. And literary consultancy, Cornerstone, also White Fox. Depends what kind of editing you're looking for. If you're looking for, as I say, where I like to work, which is at the part of the stream where you've gone through that second bit and you're ready to hone the final product. Reedsy's great for that. And if you think you've got a great idea, you're trying to write it, it's a bit of a mess, you want a manuscript assessment, you want a developmental structural edit, then absolute more for. I mean, those people are on Reedsy, but there are also some really good people who work at TLC and Cornerstone, another agency, and so it can be a little bit of a process, a bit of a swipe left, swipe right kind of process.
So we need a Tinder of editors.
We do need a Tinder for editors,
Maybe we have to put that to White Fox and Reedsy, see if they'll get that done as an app. And lastly, Andrew, where can we find you then? So we know where to find all these other editors. I know you're booked up, you're very busy in terms of editing. But
if you want, you can contact me. It's andrewlowewords.com, and also I'm on Reedsy. So search me on Reedsy. I think it's Reedsy.com, I imagine. I'm on Twitter at AndyLowe99, ANDYLOWE. And I'm also on Facebook, but I've got about 42 likes on Facebook. So I never really do anything with my Facebook.
Let's see if you can get you to 50 or 100 by the end of the week.
I much prefer to work directly, and I like Twitter. Twitter's kind of a really good place. I share a lot of writing tips and a lot of editing advice on Twitter. I don't really tweet anything else.
No, so you do indeed. You do share quite a lot. So thank you, Andrew, for coming on to the Indie Network. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I think it's been really insightful, to hear from a professional from a non-author point of view, but also at the same time just to get some real frank advice and I think different views on some of the common questions that we ask ourselves. So yeah, really, really useful. I learned a few things. Hope the authors did as well. And yeah, hopefully we'll have you back on another video in the future to share some more tips with us.
Thanks. Great, Ben. Thanks for the play.
Alrighty. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Bye-bye.